Hello, it's Friday, September 18th, and the editorial boards for the News Tribune, the Times, and Bureau County Republican are meeting with Democrat Lance Yednock of Ottawa, who's running for his second term in the State House in the 76th District, which includes LaSalle, Bureau, Putnam, and Livingston counties. He is challenged by Travis Breeden, a Utica Republican. Lance, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for re-election.
Thank you, Derek and Tammy and Goldie for hosting me again. As you stated, I'm Lance Yednock. I'm a Democrat from Ottawa here. I'm a one-term legislator thus far. I'm running for re-election because I still believe that I can be a solid, moderate voice for the members of the 76th District in Springfield.
Okay. How would you rate the state of Illinois' response to COVID-19, and what, if anything, should be done differently?
Well, I would say that the governor has really showed true leadership on this subject. Right from the beginning, he stated that he wanted to flatten the curve and make sure that our hospitals and our nursing homes weren't overrun with COVID-19. As you know, it's a novel coronavirus. We really had no clue who this would affect and how it would go through. Obviously, we have almost 8,400 people in the state of Illinois alone dead as of today. And I think that his intentions were pure, and he has showed real leadership. And I get a sense of that from talking to constituents. They said that he really did set a good tone and do the right thing. Now, going forward, I will say that I want some clarity in the decision-making process. I think that we need to have a little bit more transparency, and I'm hoping that there will be more legislators involved in the decision-making process. I think that is sort of unclear. I mean, we all have questions that come in from constituents regarding why we're doing A and not B. And sometimes we do get a response back from the governor's staff or the Illinois Department of Public Health. Sometimes it's not clear why a particular decision was made. So on balance, Tammy, I think that he's done the right thing thus far. I think going forward, we're all challenged by what we're going to do and what our strategy is going to be going forward.
Okay, thank you.
What are your thoughts on mask wearing?
I believe that it is a very low-hanging fruit way to try to stop the spread of COVID-19. I think that if you just want to say, let's do everything we can, that is the easiest thing short of getting a vaccine, start with that. Wear a mask when you're in public. Wear a mask when you're inside, indoors, closer than 6 foot to people. Just go by the guidelines. It's not a lot of time that you have to have the mask on. And our first responders, our doctors, our nurses, so many people wear these all the time. And it has been proven to be an effective way to stop the spread of viruses, period. So I really think it's just a simple way to try to keep the virus from jumping and let us get out of this epidemic situation.
How would you grade Governor Pritzkers' performance?
Do you want to be more specific about that, or you just mean on the coronavirus response?
Just overall.
I think that he's done a pretty good job thus far. I could say the first year we had a balanced budget. There was a lot of bipartisan measures that went forward, things like the blue-collar jobs. We did incentives for data centers to locate in Illinois, and I think, in fact, there's one being built now in DeKalb. We reinstated the, I think it's called the manufacturer's purchase credit. So there was a lot of things that he did right by saying, I find that the other side's concerns are important, and we want to work together to make our state better. He's been pretty inclusive of everybody's concerns up to this point. I think the stress of the current situation is not helping us work towards more congenial legislation, or at least I should say, we're not, I'm not seeing the sort of bipartisanship I did in the first year, but we have only been in session for a couple of weeks total this year.
And given the latest accusations, should Speaker Mike Madigan resign?
Well, there's a federal investigation going on right at the moment. And I think that it behooves us to wait and see where the federal investigation goes. And if anybody is implicated in ComEd's corrupt schemes, then they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I think it's more important that we understand that this is bigger than any one legislator. We have governors, we have congressmen, other legislators, municipal leaders from both sides of the aisle that have been implicated in things over the years. And obviously we have a systemic problem in this state. We need to do lobbying reform, ethics reform, disclosure reform. As it turns out, yesterday I spent an hour or so with the legislative leader. Because I'm not a lawyer, there's a lot of terms I need, definitions from. And so we spoke about some of the suggestions that are going through the working group, a bipartisan working group right now. And, I had a lot of questions on how they will lead to a better state government. I don't want it to be window dressing. I want us to change ways that are significant and meaningful. So I'm not going to call for anybody's removal unless they are convicted. I wouldn't do that to a friend or a political foe. I think due process has to still be the law of the land.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the fair tax amendment?
I personally believe that it is a more fair way to tax income. 32 other states and the federal government tax income at graduated rates. We have a structural deficit problem in the state of Illinois, and this has probably been exacerbated over the years by the fact that we have been very, very hesitant to raise taxes on the middle class and the upper socioeconomic class also. I think that we should consider it, but I will say this, I am also very, very cautious about if it does pass, how we use the money. I want to see if it does pass, that it goes to funding essential services or current services and paying off debt. I just want to make sure that it wouldn't be used for, let's say, new programs that we just can't afford. I just still fundamentally believe that it is a more fair way to tax. If we're going to ask those who had pretty much all the gains in the last 30 to 50 years to pay a little bit more in income taxes versus going to people that make 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 on up to 250,000, I don't think that it's going to materially hurt those to pay a few more dollars towards making our state, a well-functioning state.
What can state lawmakers do to reduce the tax burden on residents?
Well, that is a complex question that I have not, I did not anticipate. So to lower the tax burden. Well, for me to say that we're going to just freeze property taxes doesn't take into account how we fund schools. I fundamentally think that we will have to look at broadening the tax base to more people, more products, more services in the long run to just spread it out further. I do think, probably attached more to Tammy's question about the fair tax, that we should ask those who have had pretty much had very good successes in the last 30 to 50 years, that is higher income earners, to pay a little bit more to try to fund services. I think that's just a couple of avenues that we have to look at. It's probably a little more complex question than I can just say, because if I was to tell you, Goldie, that simple, we'll just cut all the taxes, across the board for the middle class or anyone for that matter, it's not being realistic of the situation in the state of Illinois.
Yeah, and continuing with that, with talk on the budget, I mean, are there other fixes out there? I mean, we talked about the fair tax, but is there anything else out there that you see as a means to fix the budget?
I would certainly be 100% behind the idea of going through every single agency and every single department and saying, what program are we doing now? Are we funding that we are not getting the returns that we expected? Or is it something that we've been funding for a long time and we just don't see that the need for that has changed? I think the hard part about what I'm learning about government in general is that, you know, there's reasons why you start a program and even create a department. And in the end, you say, we're going to start this program to fix problem A or help, you know, group A. Sometimes the needs are outsized, or we've done something for a little while and we just don't stop the program. I really honestly believe we need to do an A to Z scrubbing of government and say, what programs are we doing now that we just are not getting the return on investment, for lack of a better way to say it. If we do that, we might find some savings. You know, we have the lowest head count per capita of any other state. And, you know, when it came to the unemployment system and other things that have cropped up during the pandemic, we have seen what hollowing out of government can lead to. We have not invested in many of these things, and it's come to hurt us more now than it did, you know, just by letting things fester. So I'm always hopeful and open to suggestions, and, you know, I listen intently to my friends on the other side of the aisle about their ideas about this, because I think that they genuinely want the same thing as we do, is to have effective and efficient government.
During your campaign in 2018, you said your decision making would be based on the benefit of the Illinois Valley. Can you cite specific examples when you voted for legislation based on your constituency and their wants rather than along party lines?
Sure. Well, there were some of the bipartisan measures that we voted on. You know, we had to vote to raise the gas tax for sure, because we hadn't invested in our roads and bridges for so long. And it was actually the Chamber of Commerce and other engineering groups that were saying, we're actually just spending more in repairs on cars and traffic jams and all the things that actually cost people money. And so those types of bills that I voted on, I think, were at the benefit of us in the long run. There was some bills that came up last year that I was, you know, maybe inclined to vote with my party on. There was some criminal justice reforms about felons going to college. And after sitting through the debates on them, I changed my mind and said, you know, I think talking to enough of my constituents, they would have some concerns about this. And so I ended up voting against our caucus on a couple of the criminal justice reform bills. And even I think the BIMP this year, there was some things. The BIMP is the budget implementation plan, how we actually spend the money in the budget. There were some things in there that I don't think that my district would have wanted me to vote for. And even if I personally thought that they might be worthy causes, I voted against that, just to say, you know, I understand that people in our district have different concerns than maybe the urban centers of the state.
Okay. I think Goldie has a question for you.
Sorry, I was on mute there. You had shared your top 3 priorities, which were a focus on jobs, prioritizing your constituents over political agendas, tax relief for middle-class families. How have you followed through on those priorities, and can you give specific examples?
So tell me the first one again.
A focus on jobs.
Focus on jobs. Well, obviously, some of the capital bill has a big thing to do with that. This area is large in part with business owners and tradespeople that are, you know, working to fix our infrastructure in the state of Illinois. And that was a big thing that we've done. You know, we did, I think, $2.7 billion in work this year on state roads and bridges. And that was trickled down to about 616 or 20 million in local projects, municipal projects. And those have a far-reaching, they have a far reach more than just the person's out on the job. There's suppliers, there are insurance companies, there are all the different factors that come into a capital budget that help out the economy in general. Also, I have definitely been on the side, and we're on a couple of bills for pushing through career and technical education. I think this is still going to be one of my focuses if I'm reelected, is to try to keep pushing more dollars for our high schools and our community colleges to work with our manufacturers, our business owners, to train our members, our students, to be ready for the next level of jobs. A good example would be Streeter and Vector having a relationship there where some of the Vector had set up welding machines and other infrastructure in the high school itself, and they trained some of these kids to do the work, and they graduate and go to jobs. We're seeing that at IVCC at their Career and Technical Education Center. They're partnering with large companies, small companies, medium companies to try to learn manufacturing. So those are two of the ways that I think that I have worked towards that goal. You might have to give me the other point. I didn't write down everything.
The second one was prioritizing your constituents over political agendas. That was your second priority.
Well, I think you could look at my voting record easily and see that I more than likely, much to the chagrin of some of my supporters and my central committee here, I voted against quite a few things that the caucus voted in the majority on. Last being that I can tell you is the remote voting and remote committee bill that was in our special session. I took a little bit of heat from that from my own caucus on both the Senate and the House, because I really don't think that doing Zoom meetings to make legislation that can affect the whole state or my constituents was a fair way to do this. And again, I would say the easiest thing is to look at my voting behavior versus the rest of the caucus. And again, there was plenty of debates where I had changed my mind if I was going to naturally incline or be inclined to vote with my caucus. I listened to the debates, talked to the people on the other side of the aisle about where their concerns were, and changed my vote or voted with them to say, this is, I think, is what my district would want me to do.
The last priority, and for viewers, we're referring to the priorities that you outlined during your campaign in 2018, just so we're clear about that. We're revisiting them. That's why we're asking about them this time around, now that you've got a couple of years under your belt. That last priority that you had listed was tax relief for middle-class families.
Tax relief for middle-class families is really going to be part and parcel with the fair tax. If we do pass the fair tax, we will see some income levels go down and others will stay the same. Again, it's maybe a little amorphous, but it's if we actually can raise our budget to help our structural deficit by asking those who have had $250,000 or more in earnings, you know, we will be giving sort of more natural property tax, or I'm sorry, tax relief to the middle class. That is a much tougher one to do. I will be the first one to admit that when you're making decisions that might affect people the most needy in your district, you have to be somewhat cognizant that you know, you have to make tough decisions sometimes.
And switching gears a little bit, how would you rate how legalized marijuana has gone for the state?
Well, the lines themselves at the recreational marijuana dispensaries, I think, is telling that these aren't first-time users. I could say from knocking on doors in my first campaign, there are plenty of people who were using marijuana way before we legalized it. I think that obviously the amount of revenue that we're bringing into the state, and actually the growth around grow operations, places that are growing the cannabis, has also been a good opportunity for jobs. There are people that are taking jobs in the dispensaries and the growing operations. I think overall it's been pretty good. I'm sure that this is something that's, depending on, your belief about, alcohol and cannabis as a substance, you may have a different opinion, but overall, I believe it's going about as well as we could expect.
Sure. And have you touched base with law enforcement just to kind of get their reaction so far?
Yeah, before we passed the bill, I did talk with the sheriffs around here in 3 or 4 counties, and they had their concerns about it. Honestly, they said, it's the people that are on alcohol are usually the ones that, have more tendency towards violence, not so much the ones that are on substance, but they had their concerns about it too. In the end, I think naturally they are going to be against legalizing something that, the government still considers a Schedule I narcotic, and I understand it completely. I guess I was taking a more practical look at it to say, enough people that I know and that I have talked to on the campaign trail said that they think that we should legalize it and take the tax revenue versus letting cartels take the tax revenue or take the revenue. I think this was just where the district was at this point.
Sure. And you mentioned the campaign trail. What are some things that you've heard on the campaign trail this time around?
Well, this time around, I think that the global pandemic has been the topic to really speak about. Remote learning in schools and businesses, and how the economy is going to be affected by this pandemic. So that's probably the biggest issues that I'm hearing about right now. Some people aren't sure whether we should be in school, and some think that we should absolutely be in school. And we have a lot of concerns from constituents over, how our businesses are going to get through the winter if we slide back into phase 3 or phase 4 with the mitigations. I think that people are just at that limit of, we're all wore out over this situation. And when you have a 50-state strategy that is, haphazard at best, we're all kind of at that point where I think everybody wants to move on from this as fast as possible. Really, that's been probably the largest topic at doors while I'm stopping there at night.
Sure. And how have you responded to them, as far as what you can do as a lawmaker for them?
Well, the biggest thing about my understanding of being a lawmaker right now and what I've approached it, how I've approached it, is just to listen, to try to find out what the majority thinks. I think most people have said that they believe that this pandemic is real and the deaths are real, and they wanted us to have a response to keep as many people safe. When you bring up how many deaths we've had in nursing homes or in hospitals, or people that I've met whose family have succumbed to this, even people in their middle ages, they are concerned about it. They want to make sure that we are just doing the right things for public health. But I will say that there is a lot of concern about how we can continue to go forward and have our bars and restaurants and other establishments only being able to handle so many people. I mean, those are genuine concerns from everybody. What I say to them is that any policy that comes up, I'm going to take all of these things into consideration. I continue to talk to the governor's staff and the Illinois Department of Public Health about constituent concerns and strategy and what they sense we are going to do going forward. That's what I think the job really entails, is trying to find out what the majority of the people in my district want me to vote as.
Do you believe the state parks, such as Starved Rock, should have a fee that would help maintain them? Why or why not? And You know, should another,
I think it,
oh,
I'm sorry, go ahead and finish, Jared.
I was going to ask, should another alternative be sought if not a fee?
Sure. I'm on the same page as Senator Resin on this. I think that we should absolutely consider having a fee to use the park, a per car fee of some sort, in order to maintain the capital needs of the park. I did secure, I think, up to about $10 million in this capital bill to try to help assuage the needs we have there at Starved Rock. That's something I'm going to continue to push for. Now I just need to get us to spend the money here. I don't know what the alternative would be other than to trying to tie some sort of an asset or a revenue stream to go only to Starved Rock. Senator Resin and myself are on the same page of this. We constantly are probably bugging the DNR and the governor's staff on the subject to say, this is the largest, parks. We have the most visited park in the state. It is a great driver of commerce in this area, recreation. It's a great source of pride. But we also have Buffalo Rock, the I&M Canal, Matheson Park. And there are people who want to actually help and volunteer and clean and do these things. But there are some stumbling blocks on doing this. And these are the things that I think that I'm challenged on, and trying to challenge the DNR or the state of Illinois to find out if I can change some sort of a policy so we can have more volunteerism and try to make the park as beautiful as it should be. If we can, successfully ask for a fee to enter the park, and that money can be put into the park and this park system alone, then I'm 100% for it. My fear, as always, is if we do that and we raise funds from this, that they will be, lost and used on some other park. That's going to be the cornerstone of any bill that we get to pass on that subject. And I should add to this, Derek. So we did take over, the 6,000 some acres from the old Bootsy Unicamp property. So some people have put suggestions to me about making that into, a couple of different parks, besides the fossil park for geology students. Also, we might be able to do an ATV park there. We might have a bigger equestrian area that, we can pay permit fees and try to raise revenue that goes back into these parks also. These are just suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
How have you worked with the other side of the aisle to get legislation passed?
Well, I'll say the 2 or 3 bills that I had passed in the first term. What I did is I went over to the other side individually and introduced my bill to them, asked them if they would vote on it, asked them for what their concerns are, and I was quite surprised that the majority of them had, sat down with me and said, well, does this bill mean, we're going to do this, or does this bill mean this? So I was able to explain to many of them on an individual basis on what my bills were about. And most of them said either they were going to support me, or even if they didn't support my bills, they wouldn't try to poison the well against me or make me look silly on it, because they respected the fact that I went over and talked to them personally. There's another anecdote to that. A couple of my bills, one was a regulation bill for heavy tow operators, of which we have a few in our area. I didn't really get any too much questioning on that. And someone came over to me from the freshman caucus, the Democrat freshman caucus, and said, how are you getting by with not getting, basically hazed on the floor of the House when you're arguing these bills? And I said, did any of you go over and talk with the other side about what your bills are and what you intend to, what your intentions are? And most of them said, well, maybe not, because they were too afraid to talk to their side or something. I said, well, we're all in this together. We're all trying to make our state better. We have maybe some divergent views, but there are so many commonalities and common goals here that I think that this is what we're supposed to be doing, is bridging across the aisle to try to make better legislation. And so that is what I have done in my first term there, and I would continue to do that, of course. Again, there was some bills that came up that my caucus expected my vote on, but hearing the debates, I talked to some of them about what they were trying to do with us, and I ended up voting with them on the bills. That's just how I believe this district is. It's how I was raised, is to listen and try to find common spaces that we can, just have a better government overall.
What is your stance on gun control? And does Illinois need to change its gun laws? And if so, in what ways?
I wasn't a big proponent of gun control laws in the beginning, and I really haven't changed that now. I think I have plenty of friends that are in the NRA, and their biggest concern is the idea of gun registration. And so I had a couple of, I had a meeting over in Streeter a while back where I got on, a lot of supporters of firearms came over, and we had a very, very good discussion on what their concerns are. All those people are law-abiding gun owners. They have FOID cards and/or concealed carry. They get background checked all the time because that's what happens when you have a concealed carry or an FOID. If you do something wrong, it goes immediately into a database, and you have your privileges or your rights to own a firearm taken away. I didn't vote for a few of the measures this year or last year that were concerning gun control because honestly, Derek, they didn't lead to anything. If someone would say, we're going to raise a fee on this, FOID cards, and this is all 100% going to go to mental health and background checks, then, it might be something I would, even consider. But if it's just a matter of raising fees on FOID cards and CCLs, and it doesn't lead to any less gun violence, then I just can't be for it because the district isn't for that. I want a safe community no different than everybody else. But those who are choosing to use the FOID system, the CCL system, to, for the purchase of the guns are doing it the right way. And I don't think that they should be punished over that. Where we have the most gun violence is illegal guns. We should really be looking at the straw buyers and the other communities, or figuring out where most of these guns are coming from and try to stop it at the source more than a law-abiding citizen.
Okay. In what ways have you represented Illinois agriculture?
Well, I do sit on the agriculture committee in the state, so I have had plenty of meetings with some of the local Farm Bureau people and 4-H, supporters to hear what their concerns are. I did get a grant for the ag program at IVCC, and what I think is most important is, being shown that the agribusiness community really does want to, improve their soil, get more young people involved in agriculture in the state of Illinois or in this country. And I'm surprised, I was actually surprised that how forward thinking some of these people in the Farm Bureau are. I can't tell you any specific bills or anything of that nature, but you could probably look and see that bills concerning agribusiness I was in support of, because most of them came to me and talked to me, the local people, about what their concerns are, and I agree.
What would you consider some of your successes, and what lessons have you learned in your first term?
That's a good question, Colby. I think successes, if I can just be a little general, was that I have truly been able to bridge the aisle. I have spent plenty of time getting to know legislators on the other side of the aisle and my own side of the aisle. And I think that's been one of the most enthusiastic things I look forward to is I understand that the other side has some of the same goals, and I believe in some of what they want to do and how they want to get there. building a coalition of a majority to pass a bill is very difficult. And I think that that's probably my biggest success, is knowing that the members from other districts, regardless of party, respect me and respect my, my genuine concern to hear what their concerns are about legislation in the state of Illinois. I'm certainly proud of, I did run to stop the so-called right to work zone bill that Governor Rauner, former Governor Rauner put in. And I think that was a cornerstone of why I ran. And we did get my bill passed to stop that idea, because it's something that this district doesn't believe in. Those I think are a couple of my biggest accomplishments, but I'm certainly proud that I am willing to sit down and listen. I've even done that for other legislators too. Karina Villa, who is, I think, running for Senate now, she had a bill concerning insects and bees, that had to do with pesticides. Well, Charlie Meyer, who is a large farmer from downstate Illinois, I know that is actually a passion of his, because sitting on the agriculture committee, he always talks about planting rows in the ditches or in the waterways to try to attract, the pollinators. And so before any bill came into the agriculture committee, I introduced Karina to Charlie and said, Charlie, you expressed to me in committee about your love of trying to make the agribusiness community better off by doing things like conservation and plantings for pollinators. She has a bill that she wants to talk about, and instead of coming to loggerheads right off the bat, why don't you two get together? And as far as I know, they still are working together on that. So I think that's been my strength, is trying to really be a conduit between the two parties.
Before we conclude our session today, we want to give you an opportunity to share with us why people should vote for you. This is your time to share with voters anything you wish.
Sure, thank you. Well, I've been honored to be the representative for the 76th district. I spent a lot of time going and talking to voters about what's most important and trying to find the absolute majority in the district. I don't necessarily believe in voting down partisan lines. I am one that believes that the best thing for a legislator is going out and knocking on doors and talking to people, because you really get the sense of what they believe in. It's really easy to listen to the loudest or hear the loudest, but it's not necessarily the majority. I want to see us grow this economy. I want to see us bring manufacturing back to not only the state, but also to this country. And with that in mind, even some things that might not sit well with my own caucus, I would be inclined to vote for, because in the end, if you have jobs and you have good paying jobs, a lot of the other stuff that goes away. Poverty is an epidemic, and anything that we can do in this country and in this state to encourage more people to build their businesses here, to bring manufacturing back, is what I will work for. I want us to invest in career and technical education and try to get an educated workforce around here so that our manufacturers will start coming back to the state of Illinois and to the United States in general. If I am lucky enough to be the representative for another term, I can tell you should expect more of the same. And that is someone that is a sober judge of policy, that goes out and talks to people and listens to what their concerns are and tries to make a judgment how I should vote based on the absolute majority, not just a partisan issue.
All right. Thank you, Lance, for joining us today. And thank you to those who watched. Remember to vote on or before November 3rd, and to go to newstrib.com or mywebtimes.com or bcrnews.com for election coverage across LaSalle, Putnam, and Bureau counties. Thanks a lot.